Welcome to the SRS Podcast. I'm your host, Aaron J. Babyar, and I'm the Training Director of Support Raising Solutions. Whether you're a new ministry worker or a veteran looking to increase your competence and confidence, Support Raising Solutions seeks to bless you in your quest to be a spiritually healthy, vision-driven, fully funded Great Commission worker. My guest again today is Ellis Goldstein. He joined us last week in sharing about the generosity journey, but we wanted to do a part two, and we wanted to, staying on this topic, but slightly shift and talk a little bit more about why we as ministry workers, whether you work in a local church or you're a missionary, or perhaps you're in youth work and you are quote unquote parachurch, which I don't really like that term a whole lot. I know you don't either, Ellis, but
I really don't. It is so unbiblical. Yes, go ahead.
Yeah. But everyone knows what we mean when we say it. Yes. So you are the church. You are the church. But anyway, if you're working in ministry, you get to give. You should be giving, and yet, Ellis, I know that you and I both have struggled with that, and we've seen others struggle with that. So that's what we're going to dig in today. Before we jump in, for those people that might have missed last week's podcast, I want to encourage you to go ahead and press pause and go listen to last week's first, because it's a good opportunity to meet Ellis a little bit more and hear a little bit more about him. And I believe our conversation from last week's podcast really sets this one up well. So Ellis, before we jump into it too far though, welcome back, my friend. I'm glad you could join us for the podcast again.
And I am so glad to be here too. This is great. I love being able to talk with you, Aaron, and an opportunity just to be able to share things and help people grow in their journey of learning to give and trusting the Lord for only what He can do, and that is to provide for us.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Well, now you find yourself in Orlando, so I want you to help me dispel some myths just for the fun of it. When you live in Orlando, you don't actually wake up at the Disney Castle every day, right? There are other parts to Orlando. Tell us a little bit about where you live in your city other than Disney.
When you said wake up at the castle, and all I'm thinking, Aaron, is that I sure hope not. No, I live in a normal community in Orlando. I have to admit that I am enjoying not having. I've lived here twice. This is my second time, and I have to admit that I am enjoying not having to shovel snow. So that part is fun.
Yes.
But when I go out the door, I do not see people dressed up as Mickey and Minnie. So I don't see that here. So I'm grateful.
And of course, you work with Cru, and Cru is former Campus Crusade for Christ, and they changed the name, of course, years ago. But it's very much a campus-centered ministry with reaching college students for Jesus Christ. I realize it's a very broad stroke. Tell us a little bit more about Cru before we continue into our conversation.
Well, when many people think about Cru, they do think of us as a campus ministry, but that's a bit of a misnomer. Is that when the ministry was started back in 1951, and while it started at UCLA, the vision was never to be only a campus outreach. It was to become an outreach into every segment of society, and that's what it has grown into over the years. As the ministry spans the globe, is probably one of the largest missions agencies around. Now, The campus ministry continues to be one of our largest ministries, and for those that are in campus ministries, they know that that there are so many young people that end up going into Christian, serving the Lord, going full time. And so it is a great place of seeing laborers raised up. And so we continue to see that. I came out of the campus ministry, just many, many years ago. And I am so grateful for having, in a sense, grown up in my faith in our campus ministry.
Yeah. Well, and I'll say a couple of encouraging things about Cru as well. Doing what I do with helping to train ministry leaders consistently, I get to interact with people from all sorts of different ministry organizations. And I've spent a fair amount of time in other countries, including closed countries that are closed to the gospel of Jesus Christ, politically and all that. And I have met Cru people almost everywhere I have gone. So that's a testimony to how your God has expanded your organization over the years. But also, one of the things that I really love about Cru is, I don't know that any of us have ever unlocked all the perfect training and coaching and everything that comes with raising and living off support. Yet I would say that Cru historically, for the short time that I've been on this earth, I have known more people that are associated or working with Cru that really have a healthy team of people that pray and fund them to get to focus on their ministry and not be distracted by support raising, but it's worked as a part of their normal their ministry flow, their rhythm, and they're ready to go. When they hit the field, they're ready to go. I can't say that about a lot of organizations, but I can typically say that about the men and women that come out of Cru. And so to me, that's a wonderful testimony to the type of training that your organization has provided, Ellis. And I know that you have been a part of all that. So I thank you for your years of service, because there's fruit all over the world. I've seen it as a result of some of the work that you've done.
You reminded me of a conversation that I had with Bill Bright. This was some years before she died. And I had been, as a director for ministry partner development, one of the things that I realized is how significant it was when Dr. Bright came up with the idea that our staff would raise support. Because when our ministry first started, Dr. Bright, very, very small, Dr. Bright, basically raised the money for the ministry. And then
Right.
if we were ever to grow as we have since then, is that would not be possible to have a mission force as large as we have with just through that process, centralized fundraising. And I and so I said to Dr. Bright one day, and I just told him just how wonderful it was, something like how wonderful it was that God had given him that idea, and how it enabled us to because the result has been is how large we've been able to grow as a result of that one idea that he had, that he would no longer raise the money for the ministry. Although he never stopped doing that, but it would be that the staff would do it. And it is not only allowed us to grow to the size we have, but so many other Christian organizations, and Christian workers raised their support, and it's been great to see how God has used this one idea and how it's expanded, and the result has been the thousands and thousands of Christian workers that have gone around the globe to reach people with the gospel.
Yeah, wonderful. Wonderful legacy there, my friend. Well, let's go ahead and shift. And of course, last week we talked about the generosity journey. We're staying with that topic, but we're going to shift a little bit. And by shifting, what I mean is, now and again, Ellis, I train something called the Support Raising Solutions Boot Camp. And I know you helped to lead the trainings of support raising inside of Cru for many years. So in some ways, our jobs, I'm sure, have had some similarities. But frequently, a question that either somebody explicitly asks or we kind of get around to it, so to speak, is, hey, I'm a missionary. I'm doing ministry work. I really, I shouldn't be giving also, because then I'm spending other people's money, right? Like, I shouldn't be giving from money that people are giving me, or it might be a little bit more, edgy and be like, well, I don't make that much, so I don't need to give, right? So I get, usually people are kind of, they're a little hesitant in asking it, but they're wondering, should I, or do I have to, or can I give? And so we really want to dig in on that particular topic for ministry workers who are even right now raising support. should they also be giving? And even after they're fully funded, should they be giving? And so, Ellis, I know you have some stories, and I can think of one from my wife and I, but I'm going to kick it to you first, my friend, and let's begin to answer that question.
I'll never forget the first time one of our staff members, I think it was one of our staff members, asked if they should be giving. And I was really taken aback by that. I was perhaps I could say I was stunned by that question, that somebody would ask that someone who is serving the Lord and raising money would ask, should I be giving? It's when you go back into Numbers 18, and that's where I'd like to as we have a conversation like this, it's good for us to see what the Lord has to say about this. So in Numbers 18, when in 18:8, when the Lord said to Aaron, I myself have put you in charge of the offerings presented to me, all the holy offerings the Israelites give me, I give to you and your sons as your portion and your regular share. As the Lord told Aaron and the Levites, the priesthood, that God would provide for them through what was given to the Lord. Many of us have used the diagram of the triangle as Israel gave to the Lord, because giving and receiving is in a vertical relationship with the Lord, and then God provided abundantly and graciously to the Levites for the work they were doing at serving the Lord at the temple. And so, some people have asked the question, well, should I give? But it's interesting what the Lord had to say to the Levites when he said, he said this in verse 25. He said, the Lord said to Moses, speak to the Levites and say to them, when you receive from the Israelites the tithe I give you as your inheritance, you must present a tenth of that tithe as the Lord's offering. And so what we see is from the very beginning, where God is talking about how the Levites would be provided for, he told them that they too were to give. And so it's that those of us that God has called to serve in a full-time capacity, I think that sometimes some people say, well, Aaron, it could be some of the things that you had said before about people asking the questions, are we supposed to give? But I think we have to be careful that we don't have sort of an entitled attitude, or sort of that we're special in a way, where God has not only set us aside to serve him, but he has not set us aside not to give.
Right.
Giving is an incredible privilege. Giving is not a burden. Giving is a privilege that we have. And I have felt very strongly that those of us who are asking others to participate through their giving, and with what God is doing, that we too are. Matter of fact, I think that we need to be models to the church in our own giving. So it's we don't get a pass on that, and I even hate phrasing it that way. Get a pass. It has nothing. That's not it at all. It's that we have this incredible privilege, and so giving is not just a command for us. It's a privilege that we have in our response to worship to the Lord.
I'll put a little bit of a sharper edge on that. And this won't sound very biblical or kind, but don't you dare rob yourself of the joy of giving. Giving it changes you in good ways. It gives you good perspective. It helps you far more than it ever hurts you when you process that you are not just someone that gets to give up your time or your skill set to the Great Commission. No, you get to give cash as well. And that's not a bad thing. That's a good thing. Don't rob your own personal spiritual maturity that you need to really serve well in the Great Commission work that God is giving you. Don't rob yourself of that. That's like, I don't know. I mean, again, I'm not a car guy either. You're not a car guy, but that's almost like taking the muffler and the carburetor off your car and still trying to drive down the road. I'm sure for the car people, I could have used a different auto part, but the idea is you're actually removing something from yourself that you need, and if you're disengaging from the process of you being a giver. I want to point out a resource that not all of our listeners have probably read. If you're eager to work hard to develop a solid, faithful support team to undergird your ministry for the long haul, you might want to pick up a copy of the book called Viewpoints. It's compiled and authored by Steve Shadrack, and this book called Viewpoints is filled with encouraging case studies and anecdotes that will encourage you in the support raising process. You can pick up Viewpoints at cmmpress.org, where you can receive a 10% discount if you use the code SRS Podcast.
Well, one of the things that I've taught our coaches and as I meet with our staff, I really believe that there are some gospel workers that are hurting financially, not necessarily because they don't have enough support, but because they are not giving to the Lord generously. It is. When the scriptures talk about that, remember this: whoever sows sparingly will also reap sparingly; and whoever sows generously will also reap generously. Mm-hmm. That applies to us as gospel workers. That we have this incredible privilege to respond in our relationship with the Lord through our giving, and if we hold back in giving to the Lord, that I really believe that there's some people that are suffering the consequences of that, and that they are struggling financially. And I think that I do believe that there are some of those of us who are raising support that may be hurting in raising support. And there could be a number of reasons why people struggle in raising support, and we're not trying to cover them all. Right. And this is definitely not the only one. But I think that there's some people that God has withheld his blessing of providing for them because of their stinginess.
Can I give you an example?
Yeah, sure.
Well, I actually believe that my beautiful wife, Marky, and I encountered this because of a place of hurt. So, we weren't raising support at the time, but I was on staff at a local church, and the guilty shall remain nameless. But it was a difficult ministry situation. I mean, it truly was. God was blessing in a number of ways, but also there was a lot of strikes, and there was a lot of unhealth in the church. And I'll leave it at that. But there some significant things happened, and there was a lot of them in different areas. But one of the things that happened that I could dig into why it was wrong and unfair and everything else, but the church gave my wife and I a significant raise, which sounded wonderful. But at the same time, we had been living rent-free in the parsonage. And they said, hey, we're going to give you this wonderful raise. Also, the church is needing more money, so we're going to start charging you rent for the parsonage. Well, Ellis, the rent that they began to charge us over the course of the year was going to result in a $2,000 net loss. So it wasn't really a raise. It was more of a slap in the face. And it hurt. It hurt our feelings. It felt, well, it didn't just feel, it was very insensitive. There was a lot about that and that church and some of the decision making going on that was just wrong. But here's my point. My wife and I, in our hurt and in our bitterness, chose to stop giving. We felt like it should not have happened. We had been giving at that point. I believe we were giving, I want to say 10%. That might have been more, might have been less, but we had definitely set aside funds that we were giving. And when that happened, we said, oh, well, if that's how it's going to be, then we're not going to give anymore because they're not paying us enough anymore. And that's how we justified it. And, honestly, Ellis, that hurt us. Like that hurt us. I don't know that it hurt the church that much. It hurt us. Like, because something happened where we allowed a root of bitterness to take hold.
Yeah.
And it didn't help a already unhealthy situation. In some ways, it made it worse. And we had to confess, like we had to recover from that. We had to change some things. And that the Bible talks about how it's a joy to give. I still remember when we re-began our giving, so to speak, how much joy that gave us, and how much that really helped us to start some healthy steps.
Yeah, Aaron, that is a great example of what you just shared, and thanks for being just vulnerable and transparent and sharing that story. The one of the things that I have done over the years, as in my role as the MPD director for Cru, as well as also being coming out of being a coach and coaching our staff and raising support. And so one of the things that I have done, and I know it can make people feel uncomfortable, is when I've talked to some of our staff. I may have asked I did ask some of them, and I would say, don't do this in a group. I do this individually. And I have asked them a couple of questions. And so one of the questions I've asked people is, how's your giving? And I really, I would encourage that those that are listening to us today, that in the teams that they're in, I think it would be good for them to have a healthy conversation with, in this trusted group of people that they work with, to talk with each other about how they're doing with their giving, whether there have been, whether they have held back in their giving, whether they're giving generously, but to hold each other accountable that way in their growth in this area. It's not to do this in a legalistic way, but to do this, because I realize that when people, and you indicated this before, when people with this question about, am I supposed to give? And there may be a variety of reasons that people would ask that question. But one of those reasons could be is that, I don't have a lot of support, or my income is not all that high. And it's hard for me to trust the Lord in this. And that is exactly what God wants them to do, is to take steps of faith in their giving. And just as the widow gave her 2 mites, that gospel workers, who many of them have a lot more than those 2 mites, that they too need to enter into that joy of giving, and just experience what God will do when they take steps of faith. And so the question of, are we supposed to give to the Lord? Well, the scriptures answer that emphatically, specifically when he said it to the Levites, that yes, they are to give, but we are not exempt. We should not even be seeking an exemption from giving. It should be something that we should look at it this way. We're going to say, God, let me do it. Let me be involved. Let me give. I love you, and I just want to trust you in this. And I do believe. Go ahead.
You're only really exempt from giving if you're exempt from breathing, to be quite honest. If you're going to stop the one, then okay, you can stop the other. But otherwise, it's something that you get to do, you want to do. Quite honestly, you're wired for and need to do, right?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
It is interesting, though, that God has given us the ability to make a choice with that. Yeah. And so we need it, but we're not forced to do it. There's something going on there with our hearts, isn't there?
Yes, absolutely. And that's what it is. It's really a heart issue is what it comes down to. I really believe that. Yes. Yeah.
So as missionaries, or we're saying missionaries broadly here, but as people who raise and live off support, there might be some people listening to this that even, they're struggling with, I don't want to tell anybody because I'd be embarrassed. And nobody's currently asking me, so I'm not going to tell anybody either. And yet also they're realizing, okay, I need to start somewhere with this. How does someone begin to be more generous, begin to start giving, even though we're not under the law of 10%, but yet that is a great place to start. How does someone start, Ellis? What do you tell someone that is just maybe they're coming from a family that aren't even
Mhm.
believers and they've never really processed this topic that well, and suddenly they're going, "Man, I'm having a hard time getting by right now. You're suggesting I'm supposed to start giving something away? I can't afford to give. You're crazy." What would you say to somebody like that?
Okay. You know, it reminds me of a couple that I counseled with her budget back in this was in the early 70s, it must have been.
Okay.
And this couple, this example will apply to those of us that are Christian workers as well. Now, during this time, this was during the energy crisis, when it was huge in the United States, and to heat your house, especially in the Northeast, it was exorbitant. It was at that time in proportion to what people were earning, and
Mhm.
so I was helping this couple start, getting on a budget in the middle of the winter time, in the middle of the most expensive time, let's say the year, for with what they had to spend on their, keep their house warm. And so what I did is I applied a principle, from the scriptures, of where to start in their giving. And that scriptures are clear that tell us that we are to give as we are able. And I know that we like to talk about the 10% in giving, but there is a principle, a higher principle, that I think we see in this, not I think that we see in the scriptures, that we are to give as we are able. What that involves is what can you step out in faith and trust the Lord for? And so for a gospel worker who asks the question, where should I begin? My response would be similar to what I said to this couple. What can you trust the Lord for? In this situation,
Mhm.
I told that couple, I said, start with 5%. If in a sense, can you trust the Lord for that? And so that's where to begin. And for some people, they may start at a point and saying it still feels a little uncomfortable. Well, that's okay. That's
Right.
it's. I think it is so important for us as Christian workers to be giving and step out in faith in giving, because
Mhm.
we are learning to trust God to provide for us. Uh, and
Mhm.
uh, and what a wonderful thing to do is to give to the Lord out of our joy for the Lord, out of
Yeah.
our love for Him, and what I would tell people is, so if you start with 5%, start there, because I
Right.
can just about guarantee something. As people do that over time, as they grow in their ability to trust God for Him to provide for them, as they give to Him, they will see God. Uh, they will see their faith grow, and for
Right.
people who really make this intentional, uh, they will want their love for the Lord will cause them to want to expand their giving for the Lord. I think that's the way it works.
And starting somewhere is key. It doesn't have to
Yes.
be a massive amount and thousands of dollars every month, but start somewhere, right?
Absolutely. That's the key, is to start and to be consistent. And here's the other thing, and don't make excuses for not giving. Uh,
Yeah.
and, if we're, let me put it in another way. If we're saying that we want to trust God for the fulfillment of the Great Commission and to go into the hardest places on this planet and share the gospel, do you think that we can trust Him for our own giving? Do you think that as we
Mm.
take steps of faith to give, that He will not provide for us? Sometimes I think that Christian workers get things reversed. We make matters of money more difficult. We say that it's more difficult to trust God for Him to provide for us than it is to reach China for Jesus. We get things
Mm.
we get it mixed up in our heads, and and I believe that is because that our enemy wants to keep us confused that way. And so
Right.
we take steps of faith. We start giving to Him and be consistent with it. And I guarantee it that that those who do will see that God will meet their needs and will provide for them.
So here, I want to throw a little curveball in this right here for our listeners that are currently going, well, yeah, I'm already doing 5%. Hey, great. I'm gonna challenge you. What does a step of faith look like for you to now bump that up.
Mhm.
Wherever you're at right now, what does that look like for you to take a step up in your giving? Maybe you need to go from 5 to 7, or from 7 to 10 to I'm not expecting, well, anything. This is just a podcast. There's no accountability. But quite honestly, I think, Ellis, I think you and my hearts would be aligned on this. Of we want to challenge people to really look at their giving with fresh eyes and consider, what's a step of faith that I could take with my finances in giving. For some people, that might simply be, let's say they're already giving 10%, but they're giving 10% of their net. Okay, we're going to challenge you. What would it look like for you to give to 10% of your gross earnings? Meaning, if you make $5,000 US a month, before tax, what if you gave at least $500 a month to the Lord, even though, that would be giving more than your net. And so I'm getting into some accounting terms. I don't like math that much, but hopefully most people can track with me. There's a challenge there, an encouraging thing I'm saying there. We're not trying to make ministry workers poor, not by any stretch of the imagination. But Ellis, I really agree with what you said, is you can't outgive the Lord. And there is a journey. There is definitely a journey in generosity of taking that next step. And so for our listeners, Ellis, that are on this podcast and hopefully listen to the previous one with you, that would be a fresh challenge for people to do is, what does a next step in your faith journey, particularly when it comes to your finances and giving, what would that look like for you?
Well, Aaron, let me share just one thing, which I think that might be helpful for people. An additional practical thing. I really suggest that what our listeners do that that are going to take this seriously about their giving, that they bring somebody, that they talk to somebody about this. In other words, is that they, whether it's their accountability partner, whether it's a really good friend, whether it's another person on their staff team, that what they do is they say, Aaron, I want to take some steps in growing in my giving to the Lord. Here's what I would like to do. And I'm going to start doing this. And I want to ask you to pray for me about this. And I would like you to ask me ask me consistently with how I'm doing. And so I think it's important to bring somebody else into this. If it's a husband and wife, how about bringing another couple and that you really trust and say, these are some steps that we want to take. We would like you to pray for us in this, and we want to give you permission to ask us how we're doing.
Good. Yeah, great ideas. Well, Ellis, I think that might have actually been a good kind of final idea for this podcast episode. I really appreciate you joining me for kind of a 2-part series here. It seems to have been a good conversation. And for our audience, we would just say, hey, we love God. We love people. Ellis and I we're not getting a bump in our paycheck because we are on the podcast, and neither of us are making extra money off this. Or really, we're on this because we want to encourage you as people that raise and live off support to really lean into this topic and what God would have you do. And so if you're from an organization that provides fantastic training like Cru does, praise the Lord. If not, please do not just listen to the podcast. You really need to get some great training if you're intending to raise and live off support. And so we would encourage you, in that case, if you're not from an organization that provides it, we'd encourage you to be a part of one of our SRS boot camps. They are almost every month in the U.S. and we are occasionally more and more offering them globally. And so they're not everywhere all the time, but we really do want to encourage people to please get some good training and then hopefully also get a good coach, because reading the God Ask or reading one of the books by Scott Morton or Steve Shadrach, that's great. Listening to a podcast is great, but we really do want to encourage you to also get some good training and get some good coaching as you walk in this support raising area. So Ellis, my friend, thank you so much for joining us for this generosity journey 2-part episode. It's been a pleasure to have you on, my friend.
Glad to be a part of this.
Thanks for joining us for this episode. We would love to hear your ideas for future content. please visit supportraisingsolutions.org/feedback to share your thoughts and questions. Also, wherever you download your podcast from, be sure to subscribe for future episodes and come back each week to gain more insight into the process of building and maintaining your personal support team.